everyone, this is Maki. In the Universal Century world, there is a sense of conflict between people living on Earth and those living in space. This is true not only in the original Universal Century, but also in the world of G Coax. Today, let's explore how discrimination emerged in the Universal Century. Understanding this situation will allow you to delve deeper into the stories of the Universal Century. This knowledge can also provide valuable insights when watching the alternative series. Although these series take place in different worlds, the creators often drew inspiration from Universal Century elements. Some reinterpreted aspects of the Universal Century, while others aim to create something different. I'm sure you'll discover something new. By learning this history, I believe you'll also understand the weight and sorrow behind the terms Earthnoid and Spacenoid. Before we get into the main topic, I have a quick announcement. On my channel, I'm currently accepting support through membership. For 19 yen a month, you can get a name badge and special comment stamps. Alright then, let's begin the analysis. Today's topic ties in with what we discussed in the differences between the original Universal Century and the world of Gundam Unicorn. Gundam Unicorn is set in the Universal Century as well. Ultimately, how each version of the world is interpreted is up to each fan. This discussion may provide helpful perspectives for watching Gundam Unicorn. Before the Universal Century began, Earth was already collapsing due to severe environmental destruction. To address this crisis, the Earth Federation government was formed. Of course, the Federation did not function smoothly as a unified government from the beginning. The Federation established a military force called the Earth Federation Forces and used military power to push for global unification. There aren't many detailed materials or spin-offs that cover this era in depth. I plan to create a program that explains this period more thoroughly someday. After experiencing many tragic conflicts, the Earth Federation finally began to function as a unified government. What followed was the implementation of the space colonization policy. Having unified humanity through military force, the Earth Federation government launched a space migration plan that treated everyone equally regardless of race or culture. Although it could be considered a form of authoritarian rule, their actions were based on the sincere intent to restore the Earth. The space colonization plan was carried out steadily under a powerful regime. However, tragedy struck once 80% of humanity had relocated to space. Calling it a tragedy might seem like an exaggeration, as it was such a minor incident. But looking back on how history repeated itself afterward, it truly was the beginning of a tragedy. This event is described in Volume 1 of the original 0079 novel. 80% of the human population had become space residents. At that point, voices began to rise from those who wished to continue living on Earth. These people began approaching key figures in the Earth Federation government. They expressed the hope that as native inhabitants of Earth, they should be allowed to remain on the planet. It's unlikely they had any ill intent. Their actions came from a love for the place they had lived in for so long. If their love had remained just that, perhaps nothing terrible would have happened. However, the first volume of the original 0079 novel reveals more. However, these people did not stop trying to rule over those who had moved to the space colonies. And so, the conflict between those who remained on Earth and the space colonists became apparent. This is the root of the tension between us, inhabitants, and space immigrants. The conflict between Earth and space that appears in many of Yoshiyuki Tomino's stories is established here in the first volume, where it all began. This underlying conflict continues in the subsequent stories Zeta Gundam, Gundam Double Zeta Shell's Counterattack, and F91. The movie Hathaway also shares this foundation. Interestingly, the same content appears in Volume 1 of the Zeta Gundam novel. There is a passage that explains the background of the space colonization policy. As the space colonization policy progressed, members of the privileged class began to refuse relocation to the space colonies. This is nearly identical to what was written in the original 0079 novel. The fact that Mr. Tomino repeats this theme so often shows just how important it is to the Universal Century world. This theme is also deeply connected to Hathaway's story. Let's examine a passage from the novel Hathaway's Flash. It relates to what we talked about earlier, namely, the space colonization policy being carried out equally across all of humanity. This is written in Volume 1. In the present day, anyone who wants to stay on Earth must possess a permit issued by the Earth's Federation government. This policy began when the mass migration to space colonies began. The policy was intended to enforce forced migration and eliminate discrimination among colonists. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it was effective. To live on Earth, you need a residence permit. This was clearly shown in the first part of the Hathaway movie. There is a scene in which an organization called the Manhunters confronts civilians and demands to see their permits. It's an oppressive and discriminatory moment. However, these permits were originally intended to eliminate discrimination. The policy allowed only those essential to Earth's environmental recovery and cultural preservation to remain on the planet. Because only a tiny fraction of people could receive those permits, the space colonization policy was carried out equally across all of humanity. In many of his novels, Mr. Tomino wrote that forced migration was implemented to avoid discrimination. However, the idea of continuing to live on Earth in order to preserve it as a special exception became the root cause of conflict. Hathaway takes issue with the concept of special exceptions. It's the same theme we explored in the episode Who is Hathaway's True Enemy? The conflict structure of the Universal Century was ultimately shaped by people who distorted these exceptions to prioritize their own gain and comfort. Yet originally, these exceptions were created out of goodwill. In the real world, some environmental researchers argue that nature, once altered by human hands, cannot simply be restored by humans disappearing. Walking away isn't enough to regenerate Earth's environment. The concept of special exceptions was created as a kind of reparation to take responsibility for the damage humans had caused and actively work to restore nature. However, this well-meaning concept was eventually twisted, giving rise to a long history of conflict and tragedy, including the infamous colony drops. The idea of something born from goodwill also connects with the Lovelace's box that appears in Gundam Unicorn. Although Gundam Unicorn was written by Mr. Haruto Shifukui and not Mr. Tomino, it still inherits and explores the challenges of Tomino's world. I plan to continue producing programs that explore the history of the Universal Century. I'll also be digging deeper into Gundam Unicorn and the mystery of Lovelace's box. Please look forward to it. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. See you in the next episode.